we are a very different species as far as the tools and hardware from a rave. But the way that there is a potential, according to Ra, to make a bridge between us and them is to educate people enough to where we can find someone who is willing to be that bridge. Now, pentas follow alphas. Pentas follow alphas. Alphas are what makes the difference. This whole thing about what a penta is going to express as an awareness. Remember, pentas follow alphas. So this is what makes the penta ultimately through a wa, the alpha being able to guide the wa, and then ultimately was coming together to form gene pools, we finally have a capacity to maintain and grow as a species. Isn't that an interesting dynamic? So there's an OC16. Here's one penta. You put 3 pentas together, you get a OC16, an organized group of 10 to 16 people. Then you add them together and you get Wa. So pentas follow alphas. Alphas are going to be in charge of controlling or dictating or managing or guiding pentas. So pentas accept the direction of alphas. Pretty clear, right? All right, so now human pentas are guided by human alphas, as we've learned, rave pentas by rave alphas. And a rave alpha will not be able to guide or control a human penta. That human penta and rave penta are not going to mix. Just like the components don't mix, the pentas don't mix. So then a rave alpha will not be able to guide or control a human penta. Human alpha could not guide or control the rave penta. So how are we going to have a happy medium? These special bridging ones who can communicate being human, they can communicate with the rave penta. And that is the right angle cross of laws. Any right angle cross of law born post 2027, and they have to be right, as in quad right. Okay, so that's the prerequisites in order that we find somebody who can act as a bridge between us and them. Right angle cross of laws, born 2027 and beyond, and a quad right. They are the only ones, according to Ra, who can act as a conduit through which the communication between human penta and rave penta can actually take place. So if we think about a right-oriented cross of laws, let's say they're working in a hospital environment, they come into a room, there's a conscious penta, okay, with a conscious penta that as they come into the room as themselves, part of what is a human penta, because that's going to be the only way to approach these creatures. So even if they are this kind of human, they won't be able to approach them singularly. Ra says it won't work as far as the communion with penta. So it's penta to penta. The right angle cross of laws are the only translators that will exist. These are humans. This is a very special gift, Ra says, is going to be bestowed on them, very unique, because they're the only translators that will be capable of connecting a human penta with a rave penta. And he says that he assumes that will give them a rather unique role in the future of whatever the relationship may be between our species and the one that emerges. So it really has to be right for them to do this work. I was watching a show, 1620, when Americas were colonized by the English, and the English learned, a few of them, not all of them obviously, learned Indian, and the translators were in control of how the conversation went, because there is no way to communicate except through a translator. So similarly, these are the people upon whom their shoulders rests the responsibility of being able to translate this information from human to Rave Penta and back again. Isn't that interesting? And to the forking of the path and the witness generation now. Okay, so this was people who were born between September 17th, 2005 and January 30th, 2006. That's the witness generation. So this is the generation, Ra called them the forking of the past generation, because all of this is rooted in Saturn in 33 and Neptune in 13. That's that definition of this channel that brings us witnessing. So obviously the witness generation. Now, 13 is the fellowship of man, the gate of the listener. Universal ideas and values in an ordered framework which inspires humanistic cooperation. We know that the 13th is one of the rule gates. So Neptune, in the role of the self in interaction, receiving information from others, right? So we can see in the 13. So open to listening, secrets, interaction. And be very careful with this keynote, but I find it fascinating that Ra labeled it also a gate of evil. What he means by evil is lack of empathy, because one of the things to recognize about the binary and everything in human design is that a gate that is specifically empathic can also be total lack of empathy. And he calls that horrifying. So you want to find somebody evil, someone who shows and express lack of empathy. Their empathy being hidden, witness generation. So on the other side, we have the heaviness of Saturn. Saturn being about constraint, restraint, discipline, constriction, slows things down. So we have the 33, retreat, the gate of privacy, which reads active withdrawal and the transformation of a weak position into a strength, going through cycles of retreat and listening, part of the truth of this witness generation. So remember, this is a gate of revelation, the 33, right? When we have the whole channel, it's the identity, the higher self, being able to express its reflection, retreat, I remember, on an experience after it's come to completion and they've gained clarity. That's the prodigal, right? Design of a witness. So being retreat, this is an interesting gate because it's one of the 3 stop codons in our genetics, 56 and 12 being the other 2. So then we're seeing constriction, restraint around the closing of an experience, and then we have a potential for renewal. Once we've had our retreat, we've come to clarity, being able to share, buck stops here, stop codon. So remembering what we need to take forward into the future based on what happened in the past, another way you could say that. When we go through an abstract process, an experiential process, there is an opportunity when things are over and done with to retreat and reflect upon it. Reflect upon it, remembering, make a kind of sense of the direction that the path took us, because we're looking in retrospect. And then once we've had the close of that cycle, move on. So according to Ra, this channel of the prodigal, design of a witness, the last time this happened was approximately 5,000 years ago. And if we think back to what was happening around 5,000 years ago, Ra says that there was a genetic mutation that led to what we call writing. This is all part of that original mutated process. And isn't it interesting that nowadays, instead of writing on papyrus, we have our social media recollections. If it's up there on YouTube, it's immortalized. There was a lay person who really dug deep into the materials of design. And I remember him criticizing me at one point, on my channel, which is why I knew who he was. And he's gone now because his last recording was presumably on his deathbed in the hospital. That witnessing of the experience, once it's over, it's done. So the papyrus burning or molding, it's gone. But now, with our current generation, we get the opportunity to look into the past of people's human life experiences that they happened to share just because they happened to share. And when they're dead and gone, it won't get deleted. It stays up there. Isn't that interesting? Staying power. I think of Saturn with discipline. Yeah, restriction, constraint, but also discipline. Staying power, you know? So that little piece right there was my recognition. I don't know what Ra would think about that, but if we think about this witness generation, if you take a look at how they live their lives, they're sharing all of this information, sharing for sharing's sake, their secrets. It's a very long time ago that happened, and now we have a very different kind of process, genetically speaking, and how they're sharing all of this information, misinformation. Because what gets put out on social media? Only the things people want you to see, right? You don't get to hear the whole story. That's why I don't like getting in the middle of confrontations or arguments when I'm only hearing one side, because that person's always going to lean it towards their side of the story. And so this mutated process of the larynx, 90,000 years ago, where we developed language, and then 5,000 years ago, here. The ability to enunciate with the sudden explosion of the Maya, development of self-reflected consciousness, and then ultimately we concretized it into physical glyphs on the, capability of humans listening and telling the story and sharing the experience, this natural progression. It was initiated by Saturn and Neptune. And here we are again, 5,000 years later. And how is it showing up now? You can see, very different. Okay, so our mutative process of the larynx coming to an end with the witness generation, according to Ra. These are the people who are the bearers of that transition into the future. This generation embodies the Alpha and the Omega, according to Ra. So the witness generation dividing humanity into two different potentials. That's the incarnative process. If we look at them from the perspective of two different groups, born during that witness generation with that channel, we can take a look at the cross of Eden, right angle cross of Eden, and the right angle cross of service. They are going to lead down the two different paths that are opened up, because as we approach 2027, this generation, don't know how many of them are still alive, but this generation, there's a lot of them, here to bring two directional pieces. And if we just think about what we know of Eden and service, one's logical, one's abstract. Makes sense, hey? Collective, the generational themes, being collectively drawn towards the experience or the experiment. And how is that going to show up? Let's take a look at the 17th of September, 2005, when Saturn transitioned into the 33rd gate. Neptune was in the 13th gate for quite a while. Okay, so in that respect, we're going to start with the cross of Eden. Cross of Eden, this 36 and 6. Okay, as far as the witness generation is concerned. We're looking at Saturn in the 33rd gate, line 1. That is the marking or the demarcation of the point when the witness generation and cross of Eden group people were born. So here's the other arm of the cross, that 11 and 12. Remember the thing that mutated 90,000 years ago in order for us to develop language? And so Ra says the first thing that you'll look at when you see this right angle cross of Eden, born September 17th, 2005, that is the design of emotional manifestation, individual manifestation. But we know that this channel is the only channel that has the effect of changing the way the entire human collective knows itself or sees itself. And you can see that's a repeating pattern here, experiences itself. So this is what was incarnate at that moment, that child, an emotional manifester. So, and here we have a very special manifester, the first of the witness generation. During the consistency of that 1333 witnessing, there was a nodal shift. So 2 different nodal configurations during that generation. Here's one from 2148 and the other one, the 1817. And this shift happened on 28th of December in 2005, shifting over to the logic. And now this is the divider between those 2 groups as part of that witness generation. Since those nodes shifted into obviously they always start with the 6 because they move backwards, the 17 and 18. Until the end of the transit was while Saturn and Neptune created definition in that channel, the witness generation's cross of service group was born. And that was January 30th, 2006. You can see that it's a design of the split definition projector that is on this cross of service on that day. Split definition, basic split projector, starting off that generation as a theme. So that's the time frame for the witness generation. People born between September 17th, 2005, and January 30th, 2006. For the witness generation, this point that divides this generation into 2 groups, the cross of Eden group, cross of service group, we had the nodal shift that we just discussed. Now we have charts to show the dynamic themes that are present within these people's lives who were born then. Okay, that shift happened again between the 2 generations, December 28th. Okay. The reason why this generation is so important is because these people are potential parents of Rave children. So you might have one of these as your children or a grandchild of yours. They are potential parents of Rave children. We're going to start with the Cross of Eden group. These are the people who kick us off, this new experience. That makes sense, hey? Inexperience turning into experience. The bonding, mating that results in conception when we have the full channel there. So again, that full channel can come in through transit or another person in order to condition that person to have babies. This is a very important marker that can help us identify those who are fertile in the sense of carrying the mutation of the Rave. And that's why this information is here in this program for you, to help us identify the Rave children. Is the parent a cross of Eden? Were they born during this time? And they are part of that witness generation, witness to the new mutation.